Hello, everyone. It's another great Saturday. Well, I'm lying. It's not a great Saturday. The sun is hiding right now. But here I am joined with Leila Rao today. And we're going to talk about how Agile can be leveraged for cybersecurity. And I'm really interested in this topic. So I will have some questions to you. Before we go, I want to thank CISO Exec for giving us this platform. This is what's bringing us together today. I'm one of the volunteers at CISO, and it is a give-back platform for anybody who wants to join cybersecurity. It has many different ways of helping people. One of them is a 5-day boot camp where both technical and non-technical topics are covered and people are trained in them. Another one is a quarterly meetups, which used to be face-to-face, but in this environment, they're going to be virtual. Another one is monthly mentoring calls, which I do get involved and help Chani to co-host. And we get leaders from the industry tell us about their experience, usually around leadership or sometimes more technical topics as well. And this month, because it's March and the International Women's Day, we're having women in the security talking to us about their subjects, which they're passionate about. So I'm Didar, as I said. I work in cyber risk. I've been working in cyber risk for about 12 years now. I'm still enjoying it, but I am trying to get more technical, and that's why I get involved in communities like CISO and learn from the experts in the community. And Leila, tell us a bit about yourself. You are the founder of Agile Extended. What is Agile Extended and what do you do?
Sure. So I'm an Agile coach, which basically means I work with organizations, usually fairly large ones, to help them change how their people behave and how they're structured or designed to take advantage of things like resiliency, faster responsiveness, innovation. So as an Agile coach, I very often come in and there are people doing good work and it's very complex work. But how do you coordinate all of these things? How does change in one place impact all the other teams? And that's how I came into cybersecurity. I was working for a government agency doing what's called fairly standard Agile coaching, working with IT teams in software development, in project management, in compliance and security. And the security part was a checklist that every project had to implement. And I was like, okay, so who's the checklist coming from? Can I talk to them? Can we figure out how to make this checklist happen faster rather than having surprises at the end? I was like, oh no, cybersecurity doesn't work like that. It's a very secret thing and they just give you what they tell you to do. And I said, okay, but in an agile way, we want to take advantage of all of this information and proactively build in what cybersecurity needs rather than coming to the end of a project and suddenly having a whole bunch of more work to do. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think many of us have been there and still there, unfortunately. Yeah, great, a great start. So I want to do the disclaimer first as well. Whatever we talk here, it's all our personal views, not of our employers. Might be different for Leila because she's the founder of her own company. But yeah, that's the disclaimer part gone. We do have a chat window if anybody has questions. I will be monitoring it throughout. I might disrupt Leila if she prefers it that way, or I can wait till the end.
Go ahead and jump in with questions.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I'm gonna give it to you. Take us away.
Okay. So to kind of set the context for this, cybersecurity, the challenges facing the industry right now are very similar to what prompted Agile. It's the new normal. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, emergent, all of these things that we're dealing with right now. I think until the last few years, cybersecurity, which means very different things in different contexts. If you're a small company like mine, cybersecurity means just do these 3 things. If you are a financial company, it's a whole other set of things. And if you're in healthcare, It informs everything that you do. So whatever cybersecurity reality your company is facing, how do you become more adaptive? Because the risks are surprising. It's not just, okay, we know exactly what's going to happen. Here's your strategy for each. It shifts from being a set of things that you have to do to, as things come up, how do we make good decisions? How do we course correct? How do we respond to something that we didn't plan for? Because that is very much the new normal in cybersecurity. So we're going to talk about how Agile can help do that, and the difference between Agile and Agility, which is a little confusing for people sometimes. And then we'll talk about how I do this with my clients. It's an approach called Compass for Agility that really focuses on the behavior-centric people response, as opposed to a checklist designed by experts that we all implement. And then we're going to close by talking about how cybersecurity best practices are really about a cultural attribute that organization owns. Like, this is how we think, this is how we respond, and everybody's engaged. So how do we make that happen in terms of cybersecurity? Does that sound okay? All right, great. So we talked about cybersecurity being VUCA, and by that I mean there's no set answers. Nobody knows exactly what's going to happen, and no one has the perfect response plan for things that we know may happen. Again, current reality, with all the research and expert done, COVID still surprised us. Very few companies.
What is VUCA?
So it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and adaptive. It's an acronym, I think, created by the US military to describe situations like this. So the basic analogy is traditional business thought, okay, we know what's going to happen, therefore we'll have our plan and we'll execute our plan and we're going to be good. Agile and where cybersecurity now is, wait, hold on. We don't actually know what's going to happen. We think we do, but we may not. And do we have a way of responding when we are surprised? Traditionally, when we get surprised, oh, our plans didn't work, let's go back and take another 2 years to create a new plan. Nobody has that kind of time anymore. Instead of 2 years, it's like 2 days if you're lucky. So this is the VUCA environment. And the way I like to describe it is, it's the ability to see around the corners. Because these days our hallways are pretty short. We can only see a little bit in front of us. It would be such an extraordinary competitive advantage to be able to see around the corners just a little bit. Even a glimpse can help organizations prepare much better. And that, I think, is where Agile and Agility play a role, because Agile is multidisciplinary. It brings in practices from other industries. You have to get everybody engaged. Interdisciplinary means that response strategies are not just designed by subject matter experts. Everybody's involved with your response strategy. And it's the difference between reacting and responding. React is instinctive, we do this, we execute. Respond is look at it, analyze the problem, look among your options that you have and say which one is most likely to be useful in this scenario. So that's kind of where I think there's a lot of parallels between the business context where Agile emerged and where cybersecurity is now. Okay. So we kind of talked about this, right? So what do we see on the horizon? And especially in cybersecurity, there are the known risks, but there are also any number of unknown risks. If we could create a comprehensive risk register for cybersecurity, that would be an incredibly brilliant person, because I don't know that it exists, because again, everything is changing. So the approach that I use is called the Compass for Agility, and it tries to create both the culture and the practice of problem solving that focuses on where are we trying to go. So ideation, the first step, applying it to cybersecurity is, what is our cybersecurity goal? Are we trying to create best practices? Are we trying to update our technical infrastructure? Are we trying to build engagement among our people? Those are all very valid outcomes, but which one is most relevant to your particular context? So that's what we do in ideation. And as you can see in the image, there are 3 techniques behind ideation. This is the how. So ideation is the what we're trying to do, and these 3 techniques are how we achieve those. For example, impact and inquiry map is, I think it came from software development actually, but it's a tool that's very useful for exploring the problem statement. So rather than going to a VP or CIO and saying, okay, what's your cybersecurity vision? Bring your experts together. Can we co-create a shared vision of where you want to be next year, 90 days from now, in terms of your cybersecurity capability, okay? Identification is about where are we now? We know where we want to go, but where are we? Are we planning for a 5-mile journey or 50 miles or 500 kilometers since you're in UK? It helps to know the context, because so often we have a vision and we work towards it, but we don't have a good sense of how far away is this? How do we know we're going the right way? And that's kind of where intake comes in. Intake takes a gap between our vision and our reality and says, we're planning a journey that should take us about this long, and we have this many people, so here's what we can prioritize realistically, given the distance, the gap, and the capability, the resources we have. From there, we go into inaction, and this is what people think of traditionally as agile, the delivery process, using frameworks like Scrum or Kanban. And the goal here is visibility, breaking down your work into small elements, deconstructing who's working on what so we can see if things are slipping, and delivering in time boxes. So that's inaction in this process. And then finally, introspection, where we look back at the previous 4 steps and say, okay, did we choose the right target? Was that really the best decision we could have made? Did we understand the reality? Or, we assumed it was a trip from, London to Edinburgh, but actually ended up being from London to South Africa. There's 2 different journeys. You need an entirely different set of resources for that. Do we know that? Did we prioritize the right things?
So is it like a lessons learned activity, this part?
Very much a lessons learned. It's going back to when we're doing the first 4 steps, we're operating on assumptions because we don't know. That's the nature of VUCA. We don't know. So introspection is about validating our assumptions. Where were we guessing right? Where were we off? Why were we off? Because the whole point of this is you're going to repeat the framework. So the second time you do ideation, you're going to be much more specific because you've learned what you've learned in the previous round. This is meant to be an iterative way for organizations to continue problem solving. So to use cybersecurity, maybe the first round we say, okay, we just want to know what our current state of cybersecurity planning is. Do we have risk assessment strategies? What do we have in terms of documentation? Where are the risk factors? The next round we might say, okay, you know what, we've got that down. Let's really focus on what do we need from our vendor partners. That's the problem we're going to solve this time. The third round could be, okay, we've got our vendors cleared out. We know how to bring things into our system. How do we get our people to be good stewards of the security system? What do we want them to do in terms of their devices, in terms of their behavior? Does that make sense?
It does. It does sound like it requires some level of maturity of the team as well. How would you say, what would be the maturity level ideally for this to be implemented?
The main requirement is a facilitator, a neutral facilitator. It often is agile coaches. It doesn't have to be. It has to be somebody who's empowered to take a group through this process. There is not a requirement for maturity at the team level. Does it help if you already are doing Scrum or familiar with it? Sure, but it's not a requirement. What is a requirement is everybody is committed to this, that you are engaged in the process, that you speak up when you don't agree with something, and you're learning. And like I said, a facilitator is required because all of these techniques and this framework in general, it's designed to take the wisdom of the crowd and co-create a goal in a very short time box. And I should specify, these techniques are designed to last between a half a day and 2 days. Nothing lasts more than 2 days because in Agile, we just never have that kind of time. And the entire 5-step framework can take as little as 1 week or as long as 1 month, but no longer. So this is designed to keep moving, to keep clarifying assumptions. If you cannot move in that time box, then you're not going to get the most value from this process.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. So the goal really here is, whether your challenge is cybersecurity or something else, do what you need to do when you need it. Don't try to think too far ahead. Don't try to outpoint yourself. Do what you can when you can, and do the smallest amount of it so that you can learn and adapt. Because every time you do it, you will learn something. Okay. So, I think I actually kind of covered this in the earlier page, but this is more about what the compass is, and that it's just a framework for discovering what we don't know when there is uncertainty. And I've been lucky enough to learn about cybersecurity from my teams. And what I do know is that it is so complex. The field is changing every day. Teams are working in spaces where there are no books, there are no textbooks, there's no guidance for this. This is just something we just heard of yesterday. What can we do? This uncertainty, you can't come with a plan and say, execute your plan, you're going to be fine. You have to learn to discover what you don't know. You have to empower people to be able to make decisions, because this industry has some amazingly brilliant people whose voices are not often heard. And that ties back into the platform for this. What would cybersecurity look like if every subject matter expert was fully engaged in problem solving, fully engaged in creating solutions for organizations?
And how does implementing Agile help with this involvement of the SMEs at the right point in time?
Absolutely. So one of the core tenets of Agile is that we do work in teams and everybody gets a voice. So very often Agile starts off in software development, but these days it's going to anybody in IT and generally business. So what we would recommend is, can we bring our cybersecurity people into our other Agile teams? Because cross-functional is the intent here. So if you are doing a major new effort, a major new software program, you kind of want your cybersecurity people involved in it, and earlier the better. So the intent behind Agile is that we understand holistically the problem we're trying to solve and what we need to do before we start doing it. So if cybersecurity members are involved earlier on, they can help clarify requirements. They can say, yes, this is what the compliance document says, but we just saw this thing happen last week, and you might have to modify to account for this. That real-time feedback loops is tremendously valuable for cybersecurity professionals. It doesn't mean the teams have to use Scrum or an Agile framework. They just have to be willing to be part of other Agile teams. And I've been doing Agile transformations now for 12, 13 years. It is different. It's the new vocabulary. It's a new way of thinking. We call it the Agile mindset. It's hard. I won't try to pretend that it's easy for everyone, but the results more than make up for it. And these days, Agile does have lots of information resources. There are books. There are so many resources online that can help people understand this mindset. And of course, there's always Agile coaches. And our job is to make Agile and its approach accessible to people, help them understand why this is in their best interest. Did that cover your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so the intent behind applying a framework like this for cybersecurity is to raise the questions. So often, when you have industries with these deep domain expertise, and cybersecurity certainly qualifies, we lose sight of the forest for focusing so much on the trees. So these questions at each step of the framework are designed to broaden the audience of who's engaged, because from my experience, ultimately cybersecurity, to be successful, it engages everybody in an organization to be part of the solution. So we have to find a way to translate the domain knowledge and the technical knowledge of cybersecurity into a more business or people-centric context. So if you are a cybersecurity expert in your organization and you want to bring the rest of your organization together to achieve this shared objective, the kind of questions you could ask is an ideation. What could be? What would be your ideal sense of this organization response to cybersecurity? Second step would be, where are we now? How far away are that? Are we fairly close to it? Is it something that we can achieve quickly? in a matter of days? Is it a matter of months? Is it years? And intake is particularly important because this is about knowing who you are and prioritizing accordingly. There is such a thing that industry best practice is great, but every organization is unique. So what makes sense in your particular context? What is most achievable? That's something that has to be done within every situation, because in, again, VUCA environments, it has to be customized. Otherwise, we're going to be too far off the margins. And as I said, this is where applying Agile, Lean to getting things done. What are the smallest things that we can do? What have we done? What is the next step? And then finally look back and basically learn better so that we can be better. That's how I would recommend approaching cybersecurity from an Agile perspective. I'm not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Cool. So I guess it's quite challenging because once you are invited to a company, they've already taken that first step already. So they want to have that agile mindset. But us, the cybersecurity professionals, how can we influence our leaders just to get into that mindset? Because usually it's like the reverse. Our security people want everyone else to have the security mindset and not really willing too much to have the agility mindset themselves. So how do we make that change in them?
So, it means accepting that what we're trying to do as agilists or security professionals, we're still trying to get other people to change their behavior. That's the bottom line, right? So when you want someone to change their behavior, meet them halfway. Change something in your behavior, show them how you're trying to work towards them, show them how to work towards you. I think in most contexts, the old days of do what I tell you to do is not going to work. Problems are just too complex these days. And people, we hear a lot about people don't like change. And I would challenge that a little bit. I think it's people don't want to be changed. But if you involve them in the process, make change an invitation, it minimizes resistance. So from a cybersecurity perspective, you want people to behave this way. Okay, that's a good start. How can you move closer to them? What is the smallest thing they can do to move closer to you? It's probably never going to be 100% overlap, but can you find ways to show them? Can you please do these 3 things? Again, very basic stuff. A complex password changes every 30 days. Okay, we implemented that. What is the next thing? What are small concrete steps that people can do? It's training, and a lot of it is talking to people. One of the things that we stress highly in terms of coaching for Agile is don't assume you have the answers. Talk to people. Feedback loops are really important. It's when you have deep domain expertise, it's really easy to make assumptions about other people. Why can't they just do this? This is so simple. It's not always that simple because they don't have the context for it. So simplify it, have the conversation, and using approaches like impact mapping or the compass, that's the way of having a conversation. And you do need to have conversations to build engagement to then change behavior. If you're trying to directly change behavior, it's not going to work very well. Does that work as a possibility for a cybersecurity expert?
I think it should, because communication is, if you start the communication, as you said, you're halfway there. You're showing willingness, you're listening to someone. And when you listen, you learn something from them, and they will be more open to listening to you, I think. And then there's more possibility of meeting halfway somewhere.
Absolutely, yes. It's like almost anything else, it starts with the basics. Communication, respecting other people's point of view. Even when you disagree, okay, we disagree, tell me more. Learn from disagreements. The other thing that would be very helpful from mindset perspective, and it does not require you to use Agile at all, is thinking in terms of observation and patterns. There are some things that are kind of universal human behavior things. There are some universal best practices, whether it's agile or cybersecurity. But can we discuss those best practices? So we don't have to say, okay, you don't have to be a cybersecurity expert, but can you please remember to use better passwords? That's the trade-off. So a lot of this comes down to communicating with an open mind, understand why people aren't doing what you want them to do, because everybody has a reason. Very few people, I won't say no one, but very few people are simply stubborn for the sake of being stubborn. They're coming from it, their own perspective, understand their perspective. And what we often discover is there are multiple ways to reach an objective. So people are more often objecting to a particular technique or a particular path than they are to the outcome. So that's where you can brainstorm and say, okay, this approach is not working for you guys, but we still have to get to where we're going to. Can we think of other ways to help you get there?
Makes sense.
And I love that you said that, because my conviction is a lot of best things about agile or agility come down to common sense. It's recognizing the way human beings behave. It's recognizing the reality of people as people. We're not just our roles and responsibilities, we're very human. There's a lot of cognitive knowledge and instincts that go into being human. Can we account for all of those in our work? And the other main thing I would like to say about agility is pursuing agility should provide skills for organization, not just to address cybersecurity challenges, but also other challenges, because these are transferable skills. And I think that's the case that we can really make. Learning to observe, learning to communicate, learning to meet someone partially somewhere. These are the ultimate transferable skills for any organization, and that's the focus. And okay, the question about agile versus agility. There is a lot of stereotypes around agile. And the way I define it is, when most people think about agile, they're thinking about frameworks for delivery like Scrum. Scrum is a brilliant framework for delivery. Agile is broader than Scrum. It emphasizes a wide number of techniques and approaches, most of which are based on a set of common values or practices, things like time boxing, iterative, start with what you know, do small things. Agility is the ability of an organization to adapt its behavior as new things happen. So you can leverage agile to achieve agility. You can bypass agile frameworks and still achieve agility as long as you have that mindset. Agile simply provides you the shortcut to achieving agility.
So it's like a tool.
Very much. Agile is a how, and agility is a what.
I see. While we're on that topic, can you explain lean versus agile?
Okay, so this discussion has very different perspectives depending on who you talk to. So what you're hearing now is Leila's perspective. So I come from Lean, and Lean is a way of thinking and organizational behavior that predates Agile. It comes out of Japanese companies after World War II when they're trying to rebuild from scratch. It's based heavily on Toyota production system and Toyota manufacturing. I came across it in healthcare, and the healthcare version of Lean that I work with was really about optimizing the whole. If you're in a hospital, how does everything that happens in this hospital work to make patients healthier? So that's the unique version of Lean that I really admire and respect, and still is part of my value system. Another philosophy from healthcare influenced Lean is people behave the way they do because something in the system rewards that behavior. If you want to change behavior, change the structure, not just talk about bad apples. So optimizing the whole, system thinking, and give people incentives to change their behavior are what I took away from Lean. I would generally say Agile is very time-boxed delivery. Lean is very much about holistic optimization, and the two work very well together.
Thank you for that.
I could talk an hour about Agile and Lean, so let's not do that.
Next time.
Absolutely, yes.
Do you have more slides?
I was gonna say, the last slide I have is sort of takeaways I'm hoping that you will all receive from this conversation. And we have addressed most of these, but just to reiterate, it's leverage the mindset, principles, and practices of agility to design and deliver cybersecurity strategy. That to me is the tightest connection between Agile and cybersecurity. The compass that I described is one way to do that. There are any number of other ways. Use what works for you. The intent here is to empower all organizations to be invested in the cybersecurity process and outcome, because ultimately cybersecurity is about people behavior, collectively and individually. So the more that we empower people, the more that we enable alignment, the more successful we will be. And the last thing is, risk is a very loaded term in cybersecurity. So what I would say is think about risk as both a threat and an opportunity. There are ways to leverage risks for our benefit, and that's a good conversation to start having inside the cybersecurity world.
I think it does make, it is quite parallel, risk management and agility, because you both trying to reach a decision with all the information you can get from whatever situation you're in.
Absolutely, you make a decision and then stop and examine your decision. And I would say that's probably the two biggest things from the Agile world I would love to emphasize is, one, start with an outcome in mind, and two, stop and inspect. As soon as possible, stop what you're doing and ask yourself, is this working? Are we going towards the outcome? Are we going further away? And because Americans, the analogy I often use is Washington, D.C., the capital, has a number of tourists visiting, often in terms of school groups. So if you're a teacher with 200 kids that you're taking to Washington, D.C., and you're on your way back, wouldn't it be very helpful to know that you're going back to Boston and not Florida? So when you get on your train, the first city you see is going towards north rather than south. That's kind of what we mean by inspect, adapt, and agile. As early as possible, stop and say, am I going the right way? Because it's easier to change earlier on than further out in the process.
And as you said before, it sounds like common sense, but I guess in corporate environment, with everything that goes on in your day-to-day work, it might not be.
I totally agree with you. It is common sense. What I find working with my clients, and most of them are very complex organizations, there's just too much other things going on. Everybody's in firefighting mode. There are all these requirements coming from 7 different directions that it's hard to simply stop and say, okay, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? And if we don't have time to think, it's hard to make good decisions.
Very true. Yeah. I do have another question.
Sure.
About the idea stage, I think it was the idea stage. You mentioned mapping. What type of tools or mapping tools do you use? Do you use like Wordly mapping? I know a bit about Wordly. Do you use that as well?
You can. So the techniques in the compass are specifically chosen to be the most flexible for any context. These are the ones with the broadest range of applications. But you can always substitute your own techniques for this, as long as you're achieving the intent. And the intent behind ideation is shared a vision that we all buy into. So for example, inquiry map, the impact inquiry map is a way of very structurally going through the process of capturing our assumptions. It starts with a goal. Again, a guess at a goal. Then we think about who are the entities who can impact this goal realization or keep it from happening. The second column. The third column is, how do these people behave right now that is helping or harming this goal achievement? And the fourth column is, what can we do to change the actor behavior to help achieve these goals? So for cybersecurity professionals, it really changes the way they think of their work, because it's not about, I want all these people to do all these different things. Now it's very specifically, okay, if you're a vendor who's selling a software product, I want you to do these 3 things. If you're an employee working in a frontline division, these are the list of things that I really want you to do. If you are developing new products internally, here's your checklist. breaking it down very much by whose behavior are we trying to change. So any other mapping technique could possibly work. And this is where I will reinforce you need a facilitator, somebody outside. It's getting very smart, opinionated people to collaborate together. It's an art form. And it's managing the conversation. It's making sure that everyone feels heard and is heard. It's making sure we don't go down rabbit holes. That is why you need a facilitator.
Also, most of us might have not done a mapping exercise before, so having a facilitator would save so much time in doing it.
Yes, I mean, it is possible for anyone to learn these techniques. I just read a book that came out in December that explains all of this. So the techniques are explained in the book. You can read it, you can do it yourself. But when you're trying to work in a complex problem space, like cybersecurity, you can't wear multiple hats. You can't be a facilitator and be a cybersecurity expert. You can't be the VP and be a facilitator. It's hard. These are just very complex spaces. And mapping gives you a way to navigate this complex space. And the value of having somebody who knows that process and doesn't have a stake in the outcome is extraordinary.
I have another question. It's not very related to Agile, but it's about the skills and the cybersecurity skills within the teams. Because cybersecurity, as you said, it's a very complex area, and most of us have very different skill sets. What is the best way to make those skills visible and visible to the process of agility?
Sure. There are two ways we can do it. There's definitely building a skills matrix. So getting everyone on the team to identify what areas of skills they know, what areas or skills they're working on, what they would like to learn. That's certainly one way of doing it. And that's a quick way to solve the problem. The other way is look at the problem. What are we trying to solve? If you use Impact Map, you know what behaviors you want to change. Who has the skills to change that behavior? That allows you to think about both the technical skills and the soft skills, because it is invaluable to have a record of a team's technical skills, because you do need the expertise in cybersecurity. But if that technical skill is not paired with the communication skill, it's really going to limit your ability to deliver the outcome. And the goal here is outcome, not just knowing. If your knowledge doesn't translate to action for your organization or for other people, you're not delivering full potential, right? So I would strongly urge teams to think about not just their technical skills, but their soft skills, and value them equally. Invest in growing. The good thing with skills is they can be taught. Anybody can learn how to communicate better. No one has to be the next Agile coach and be whatever, but everyone can learn to ask better questions, to listen better, to make it a little easier to talk to somebody about your field who doesn't understand your field. All of these are skills that can be learned. We just have to value them and invest in people to learn these skills.
Oh, that is the ideal world, that people will have time to just to realize that they are lacking those skills and then be willing to learn them. It's quite challenging.
It is, and here's, again, best case scenario, yes, use the full Agile framework, work towards agility. But even if you don't do that as an organization, there is no reason why we can't do a quarterly lessons learned. There are templates that you can borrow from Agile retrospectives to do a full-blown organizational, where are we, what do we want to learn? It takes 2 hours. I facilitate these. You can do for as many as 200 people in 2 hours. So I don't know that I buy organizations don't have time. I think they don't know how, and they don't see the value in it. The value, I think, will become self-evident, that you want people who are adaptable, people who can influence other people. The how, this is where I will say, go talk to Agilists, because they've learned how to do this. Now, you do have to adjust it from, there's a difference between doing a retrospective for 10 team members on how they've worked in the last 10 days versus doing it for 200 people for a complex project, but it is still a similar concept and they do translate. It's as an organization, most of our organizations, our biggest line item budget is people. We spend on people. Okay, so why are we not spending a little bit more to get the most out of those people? We can go hire 100 more people, or we can spend a fraction of that to invest in our existing people to help them become better communicators.
And it's all about what you said before. If people don't see the reward in doing that, then they're going to postpone and postpone and postpone until it's too late.
Until it's too late. Very, very much so. And it has changed. At least, again, I'm East Coast US. I work mostly in Washington, D.C. and New York City. I have seen so many changes in the last 10 years from a leadership perspective. 10 years ago, when I came in talking about Agile, I hit resistance. Like, what is an Agile thing? No, it's not for me. Go do it somewhere else. In the last 2-3 years, no one says that. It's more about, okay, we need this, but we don't know how to get there. We don't know the Scrum is going to work for us, but we know we need to get there. I rarely come across organizational leaders who are not convinced that they need agility. They just don't know they can do it. They don't know how to do it. But I rarely come across anyone who says, oh, no, we're just fine. We don't need Agile at all.
Yeah, I can understand that. Do we have any questions from the audience? Okay, I'm going to take. Oh, okay, you.
Mute. Thank you so much, Leila. I think it's really important, and this compass of agility is so important. How can CISOs leverage this?
So I think you're doing a lot of things already. I mean, this is a perfect example. This initiative that you put together to get people like me coming and talking to each other and listening to each other. This is an example of agility in progress. And I love that you guys are doing it. The intent behind the CISO is, again, it fits my definition of agility because you're trying to empower people. The problem you're trying to solve by getting women to come and talk to each other, break down organizational silos, that is agility. Other recommendations I would have is to do more inspections. Are we doing a survey with our people to find out what the biggest challenges are? A lot of this is linguistic. I think people hear what they want to hear. So can we talk to our leaders about saying, what are the problems they're trying to solve? How are they trying to solve them? What's working? I'm a firm believer in people can come up with better things together than individually. So if you're a leader working in cybersecurity or a CISO as a representative, are you getting 360 feedback or are you talking to the experts? Experts are great. 360 is always better. So that's where I would highly suggest that CISO can make more steps towards agility. The other thing is visibility pays huge dividends. And this is where CISO can really, really play a role because you're already doing this. And by the way, if you want to help with this effort, please become a member. The email to register is at info@cisoexec.org. And what I would hope that you would do collectively together is share your perspectives on what the problems are. Share what's working for you. It's amazing what people are doing that is working that the rest of us don't know about. So think about the time and effort we could save if we could share success stories.
Yeah, and the other thing I've often see is I work as a virtual CISO, helping companies go through certain compliance processes, getting their posture up. One of the main things that I see is, yes, at the beginning the management is involved, yeah, let's do this, let's get this done. And I work as an associate or executive for the existing CISOs or as a virtual CISO capacity, whichever works. I work as a trusted friend pretty much for the company. Some things that I see is that once you've done the agreements and everything, you've agreed, the board signed up, then you don't get any support for the staff to execute this. And no sponsoring. Yes, you sponsored for the project, but thereafter there's no support. You can't continue. Often junior CISOs I've seen, they push back things because they're not getting the right support. They can't get the business to buy in, rest of the business to join the process. And it's a massive challenge. And there's a lot of blame games as well. People's egos come in. How can you use this framework to address these kind of things?
So I love that question because the framework was designed to address those. I was a junior lean practitioner trying to get a bunch of doctors to do something. And anyone who worked with doctors know they're pretty strong-willed. And egos certainly come with the territory. There's a phrase I learned there called HIPPO, highest paid person's opinion. And
That's a good one.
That's the reality in that space. In trying to do agility without accounting for human nature, which includes ego and silos and territory grabbing, that's the reality of trying to do agile. The way the compass works in this case is bring in people together. So it's not one VP or one person signing off and saying, we're doing this. Everybody who needs to be involved in getting the resources to make it happen, who can block this, they're all in the conversation. We don't pursue a decision or initiative or policy until all these people are bought in. That's where the facilitator comes in. So a lot of times what I see with cybersecurity is it's run through the IT department and then sent to every other people and they do this. They're like, no, we don't have time for this. We actually have other jobs to do. So the way the compass works with that is before you decide on a new cybersecurity policy, bring in your other VPs. What are your challenges? What's the thing you hate the most about cybersecurity? Address those up front and then co-create a vision that they will then be invested in because they've heard it. It's common sense, but it is also very much built into the compass because it often doesn't happen. Get people to buy in early, and then by applying the compass or any other framework for time box delivery, go back and say, hey, all of you guys, your 8 VPs who approved this, we're 4 weeks in, we're not getting traction. Is this still what you want to do? If you don't want to, let's stop this. But if this is what you're still committed to, can you please work with your people to help them buy into this? One person cannot drive organizational change. Everybody has to do their job. So the group of leaders who approve this, either they say, we were wrong and that's not doable anymore, let's cross it off, or let me go talk to my people and see how I can help them make it happen. That might mean saying no to other projects to make room for this. That might mean having conversations about, okay, why are you guys not liking this? What's not working? Do you need more training? Do you need more people? How can I help you make it happen? It's communication and collaboration, yes, but whoever cares about the outcome, they should be part of making it happen. If they're not, then the outcome is not a shared outcome.
Thank you. That really helps. I should try this method for one of my clients. I hope I don't get kicked out doing the facilitator talk.
So a little bit of a backstory behind it. The framework got put together because I saw problems that I wasn't in a space to address them. I couldn't go to leaders and say, you guys are all wrong about this. Here, do this way. I didn't have the rank or the title to have those conversations. So I started creating techniques where people would challenge their own assumptions and discover the problem for themselves. One of the best ways I know that my approach works is when clients tell me, hey, you know what? You're nice. We liked having you around, but we didn't really need you. We figured out the problem for ourselves and we solved it ourselves. And that is the trick behind things like this. When people see the problem for themselves, they're more invested in solving it. It's not, oh, Leila's teaching us this or Leila's making us do agile. It's, you know what? I'm seeing a problem here. Let me go fix it. It's empowering people and also empowering leadership. A lot of times, leadership, they're in a tough position. They get pulled in so many different directions. Everyone wants something from them. And most of them are subject matter experts who got promoted to leadership. And now the whole other toolkit they need isn't there. Facilitation for leaders pays dividends. Learning to ask for what you need, learning to accept feedback. So I'm happy to work with you on adapting this for your clients. Like I said, there is a book that describes how and why this works. I do trainings with this. It's not that complex. It just requires that you have the buy-in from your clients to try this. And the way I phrase it with my clients is, the first 3 steps will take about 2.5 days. Can you give me that much time to invest?
Yeah.
After that, sorry.
So, and that's, I completely agree with you. Some of the things that I've also had to account is the culture in different countries. For example, I was talking to on a group. I was talking to someone, advising, things that we can do as cybersecurity leaders, and then I was given a lot of good advice, but the people on the channel, the egos didn't, really. I kind of sensed the body language and the tone of messages that they're not really liking it, because some people, the biggest challenge for me is ego. How do you address ego? And also the different cultural behaviors. Like yesterday, I got corrected by someone because I addressed that person by first name, because I didn't call professor whatever. That's the type of attitude sometimes you have to deal with people. And I mean, does this framework help, resolve these basic human problems?
So and that's a brilliant question, and the answer simply is no, because for this kind of framework to work, one of my prerequisites is people actually want to work together and they respect each other. You can't, if there's a low trust environment, this approach will not work. It will make the cracks more visible. It will make the pain problems more visible. It won't solve them. There is no substitute for people actually respecting and learning from each other. There's some things that we can do to cultivate those kind of behaviors, but in organizations that are not like this, and I have a case in mind of a client I tried to use this with, and there was such a low trust environment where the senior person basically just liked power games. And I'm like, okay, this is not going to work. I'm not even going to try to do this kind of process with you, because if you don't trust your people to think and make decisions themselves, you're wasting my time and yours. Yeah. So I will.
That's very true. I walked out of clients like that. If the culture is toxic, yes, it's no point, because you're damaging your reputation even trying to do anything with them.
Yes, and you're generating waste. Again, a lean thing is very much about reducing amount of waste. I will not do something that I don't think is going to work. Now, what I have done in one scenario is use the compass to build a healthier culture. So before you can solve the problem of cybersecurity or agile, let's just get your culture to be a little bit more positive and healthier for everybody. And those are some of my favorite type of challenges, actually, when we apply this problem-solving framework to attributes like having more fun. I actually had a client who just said, look, we're growing really fast from a startup to 300 people. We don't want to lose our fun culture. I said, okay, let's work on that. And we used this framework to design a way of recruiting, a way of onboarding that really maintained this fun culture. So how do you find the right people who want to have fun and value having fun? How do you get those fun people involved in this organization to leverage those skills? And how do you keep the fun going? So in scenarios like that, I would say first, fix your culture, at least make it a little better, and then start trying to solve the cybersecurity or agile problem.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Okay. So thank you so much, Leila. It has been quite a great session for me, at least, and I'm sure our members will also love it as well. We would love to collaborate with you more. We have our monthly mentoring calls on the third Tuesday of every month. We would love to have you on one of them. So if anybody wants to join us on those calls live, please email us at info@CISOexec.org. We have a LinkedIn group. You can join us there. We have a YouTube channel. You can check our previous talks from there. This will be uploaded there once we process it as well. And yeah, the next bootcamp will be in July in London, hopefully. Well, it was going to be in London. Now it's going to be virtual, so it's going to be global probably. Chani has shown me the draft agenda and it looks really good. It's quite exciting. Yeah, so that is me. Do you have any final messages to the community, Leila?
Other than the basics, I really admire what this community is doing and how important it is for all of us. So any way in which I can help, I would love to. Definitely LinkedIn, email address, email me with questions, how I can help, how we can collaborate and make things better.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
And have a great day. It's probably 4 or 5 hours behind here.
It's about close to lunchtime for me in New York.
Okay.